Okay, Simon, we're in a very quiet village by the name of Girton, just off the River Trent in North Nottinghamshire, and about 8 miles from Torksey, where Prudom had struck for the second time. And it's 3 days after he stole from Freda-Jackson at the village of Torksey, and he's made his way down here. He could well have come via the River Trent, which is very close by, or he could have used the fields and footpaths between the two, or he could have used the road, I suppose. But this village is very set back off the main road, very quaint, very old, very quiet. So maybe he came from the river. But he's 3 days now, and he needs food, maybe he needs a car. He's on the run again, he's on the move. And it's the Luckett family in this village who are the unfortunate victims of his next robbery at gunpoint.
What was his plan, do you think?
That's a good question. Did he have a plan? Was he just surviving? Was he just in survival mode, playing out his military fantasy? Yeah, was he just living from day to day?
He's come south as well, hasn't he? And then he turned around and went back north again. There's part of me says the logical thing to have done would have been, once he'd stolen the car here, to have carried on going south. We're not very far from the A1, which would have taken him all the way down to North London, and then he could have disappeared in the metropolis. Do you think that says something about his state of mind?
I think it does. You're right. And I've thought similar about his mindset. We have to remember that he ends up here, and it's been reported that he hitchhiked down to this area. So that would have been down the A1, probably from where he burnt out the Citroen that he was driving when poor PC Hay was killed. So he's on the run. He's properly on the run now. He's in survival mode. He hitchhiked, maybe in a truck, that brought him down so far to maybe Markham Moor, which is just about 10 miles down the road from here. And then he's wandering. He doesn't really know where he is, but he's in this survival mode. Again, had he got a plan? You think keep going south, but for some reason he goes back to Yorkshire, where I guess he belongs, but he ends up back there.
So he arrives here 2 days after Midsummer's Day, the 21st of June, which means he's got as much daylight as he's going to get. There's probably as much foliage as there's going to be, and it's warm at night. So fair to assume he could have survived in the open with those skills pretty much indefinitely.
Yes, indeed he could, and we know that Eddie-mcgee talks about how he could have quite easily survived off the land at that time of year. But again, maybe his psyche, he's not really cut out for it. He has 3 days at it, and then he's hungry, he's fed up, and he wants to move again. As we just mentioned, with no real plan, but he's all right for a couple of days, but then he's ready to come out of his hiding again.
So it could have been a morale thing. If he was wet, he'd have been cold, he'd have been hungry, and that's why he decided to steal a vehicle. And it's a big risk as well, isn't it, to expose himself, to actually go into somebody's house, risk being identified, and then to take the vehicle. That's a big risk for a fugitive, isn't it?
It is, and I think because he waited till the evening, till it was dark, maybe he could see movement inside the house, he could see somebody who was either elderly or whatever, and thought, yeah, this is the place where I can do it, because they won't resist. He's got a gun, he'll get exactly what he wants. As we will discuss later and talk in more detail, poor George-Luckett resisted, and he had a go, and he paid for it with his life.
Was the car significant? It was a big, powerful Rover. Do you think he was looking for a vehicle that would be a good getaway car?
Maybe. This is 1982. The vehicle's about mayor. Maybe he wanted a bigger car, a more powerful car. But again, as we've said, he ends up going back to North Yorkshire, and he doesn't keep that car for long, so maybe it's just means to an end, getting from A to B.
Do you think there was somebody in North Yorkshire he was going back to kill, maybe? If he'd got a target, he'd decided he was going to go back and wreak his revenge on somebody. Maybe the man with whom his wife had had an affair and run away.
Yeah, I'm not picking up anything like that, Simon, to be fair. And I think it looks as though he's used that firearm against people who've challenged him and resisted him at the spur of the moment, as opposed to, a real plan. I think he's just playing out a fantasy, and he doesn't really know where he's going or what he's going to do.
Prudom went on the rampage 3 weeks after the end of the Falklands War with Argentina, and he'd always wanted to be in the military. He'd been rejected by the military. He considered himself to have elite soldiering skills, but the Special Air Service wouldn't have anything to do with him. Do you think that might have been a factor? That might have played into this, the fact that he'd been watching the Falklands War play out on television? That might have somehow influenced his decision or his behaviour the moment when he flipped.
Could well have done. He's obsessed with the military survival techniques. He's probably seen those soldiers at Goose Green on the Falklands in the news, all muddied up, working in quite treacherous outdoor conditions. And remember, Simon, his father, his natural father, who he never met, he would have known he was a soldier. Maybe he had some kind of, maybe imagined his father as a hero, and he wanted to be that hero as well. He's such a mixed up bloke. He might be 37 years of age, but he's still living out those childhood fantasies of being that soldier. You've got quite a bit of knowledge about sort of firearms, this kind of thing. What's your take on the firearm that Prudom had?
Well, the gun that he chose to smuggle back from the United States, the Beretta Jaguar, was small, easily concealed, had practically zero recoil, essentially the assassin's choice at the time. It was the one which was used with a suppressor by Mossad. It was, for its size, a powerful gun. It had a small bullet, a 22 caliber bullet, but the 22 caliber long rifle cartridge had more propellant in it, so it was essentially a mini Magnum.
Wow.
The gun was easy to conceal. It was very easy to use because it had hardly any recoil. It was accurate as well, and it packed quite a punch at close range. I suppose its size meant that it was easier to bring it back from the US, and I've got no idea how he would have done that. Perhaps it was broken down into its component parts and smuggled back in his luggage. Maybe it was posted back in more than one package. But the big thing for me was how he managed to get the ammunition into this country, because you think about it, when he was working in the States, it was the end of the 1970s, beginning of the 1980s. The IRA was very active, and the authorities at ports and airports would have been on high alert, particularly for things coming into this country. So however he managed to buy it in the States, smuggled it and the ammunition into the UK, that was a big risk for somebody. And I would imagine he felt quite pleased with himself when he did that. He would have thought he got one over on the law. But what it meant was that he had a pistol which was easy to conceal, extremely reliable, very accurate, and about as powerful for its size as you could get. Like I said, the assassin's weapon of choice. What's your take on the police response, the manhunt?
I think because it was so unprecedented, and they were facing effectively a guy on military survival mode, armed, as you say, with this assassin's weapon. They were all scratching their heads, what is this guy about? What is his plan? And they had to react to it. And of course, specialist firearms units, I think it was the Manchester one that came in the end, they're drawing people from all over, with a variety of weapons, and some of them with shotguns. It was almost like a Wild West posse. I don't want to sort of decry the thing, but this has never been seen before on the British mainland. This kind of the number of armed officers to capture a fugitive he'd already killed 2 police officers. You know, it's not a robber on the run. He's assassinated 2 police officers in cold blood.
And what about the involvement of Mr. McGee, the former SAS survivalist, when they brought him in as a tracker? I know the Chief Constable of North Yorkshire got some flack over it at the time because it was an unconventional tactic. Was that the right thing to do, do you think?
I think he made the right call in the end. Whether McGee single-handedly found Prudom, or that he wouldn't have been found without McGee, maybe not. I think Prudom by this stage it almost was ready to face the music at that location where he was taken out, or he took his life, knowing he was the game was up. McGee. I think some of the reporters at the time, your colleagues, actually nicknamed him as Magoo, which. You know, so he was not taken too seriously, but what the job he was doing was very serious, and he did use his tracking skills, and he did know the kind of the point is he did know the methods that Prudom was likely to use, and that's key. The fact that he wouldn't move for several days, he would stay put, find some shelter. And this is borne out by the story that we've portrayed. You know, every 3 days he comes out of his hiding and he needs either money or he needs an opportunity to move on.
And then fast forward to 2010 and the police manhunt for Raoul Moat, and the police forces involved in that operation brought in Ray Mears as a tracker. So perhaps the Chief Constable of North Yorkshire was a little ahead of his time in that respect.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. I mean, these things are so rare. There's not a manual that you can just pull out and think, right, okay, this will all be sorted. We'll have this. We'll do this. We'll do that. There's lots of logistical differences. I mean, the officers are certainly better trained now, those firearms officers, but the decision-making, can you really train for that? I don't know. There's a lot of factors going off, aren't there? And if other people are at risk, there's risk of this individual striking again, it's a big call. Whatever you do, it's a very big call.